welcome to this episode of An Audit Minion Explores. It's my day off, so I took the opportunity to watch a movie that I've been meaning to watch for a little while. Steven Spielberg's 1987 Empire of the Sun. I had seen this many, many moons ago, way, way back, and I'll admit the first time I saw it, I hated it. I did not understand what was going on. I was just like, this movie is kind of terrible. I was just like, why on earth am I watching this? And I think the reason for that is my mom had sold me on a completely different movie. She was like, this is a movie about this kid who gets separated from his parents and then he gets adopted by this emperor and it's gonna be fun and it's like this really great, wonderful movie. And then we got about an hour and a half into the film and realized this isn't at all the same movie that mom was telling us about. But we finished watching it anyway because we were, we'd already invested in this, so we might as well just finish what we started. And so for the past 15 years, I've spent my life going, that movie was terrible. I did not like that movie. And for whatever reason, I looked into it again, just kind of curious about it. It's by Steven Spielberg, who is rather well known for his movies. And then, and I didn't realize Christian Bale's in it. He's like 13. He's young. You have to really be, once you know that it's Christian Bale, you can see it in his face. And then you go, oh. And there are other, really well-known, Ben Stiller's in there very briefly, but he's in there, and I stared at that character for a very long time, and I didn't recognize him. There are just a lot of A-list, relatively well-known names that pop up that, once you look at the cast list, you're like, oh, I know who that is, but you can't recognize them in the movie, because they look different. They're younger, for one thing, and especially with Christian Bale. So anyway, Empire of the Sun is based on the fiction novel by J.G. Ballard by the same title, Empire of the Sun. The book is based on J.G. Ballard's actual events from his actual childhood growing up in China during the Japanese occupation during the Second World War. So J.G. Ballard actually kind of experienced a lot of this and grew up in the situation, and then turned those personal experiences, used those personal experiences in his narrative to tell the story of Jamie and/or Jim Ballard, not Ballard, Graham. The name of the character, Jim and/or Jamie Graham, is actually derived from J.G. Ballard's full name, James Graham Ballard. So there's a fun fact for you. The story is set during World War II, obviously, in Shanghai. We start out in Shanghai, China, and there's the British who have kind of moved in and occupied. And so you've got the juxtaposition of these kind of well-off, wealthy British people who have settled here in their big British, I don't know if colonial is the right word, but, big British Georgian style houses that are kind of opulent and and then you have that juxtaposed with the Chinese peasants and the street markets and people who are just very destitute. And there's a very big juxtaposition between these two people groups that is made very clear, and I think very clear earlier on in the film. And I think Steven Spielberg does a really good job of juxtaposing the opulence of the British people, occupants, and then the destitution of the Chinese in that area. So there is that, at least in the setting of the film. Anyway, so it starts there, and it's right at the beginning of the Second World War. The Second World War in the Pacific Theater. The bombing of Pearl Harbor happens, but it kind of happens off screen. We kind of hear about it. And then the Japanese invade China and take over China. And Jim, who at the time, his nickname is Jamie, he's with his parents. They kind of start to move away, they're trying to start to maybe try to leave China, and then the Japanese invade. And so they're kind of caught up in this maelstrom of being swept along and trying to escape from the invading army that's invading China. And Jamie ends up getting separated from his parents in the crowd. His mom's kind of shouting over the crowd, "Go home, I'll find you." So he does eventually make his way home. In the book, he spends a significant amount of time in his empty house and raiding the neighbors' empty houses because he is 11 or 12, and has nowhere to get food, and he is starving. And so he kind of, he makes he's able to get by to a degree, just kind of living as a vagrant in his own neighborhood. And he ends up meeting Basie, who is an American. He was apparently on a shipping line of some sort. He's a sailor. He's got some friends who are also American who are also sailors. I'm not sure how that all works out. But anyway, so, but Basie very clearly in the book and especially in the movie is portrayed as a very manipulative character. But because he's literally the only person who is showing any interest at all or any stability in Jamie's life, Jamie kind of latches onto him. And, other people, very wisely so, are just like, "You should not be hanging out with him." And Jamie's like, "No, we're besties." I feel bad for Jamie. He is so naive. But anyway, so they, one thing leads to another. They end up getting captured by the Japanese, and the two of them with a bunch of other British, American, foreign people who are not Chinese are taken to this internment camp that is similar but not entirely the same as the camps that we had here in the United States. In China, the Japanese had the internment camps for British and American and whoever else. The book does a better job of fleshing out all the different people groups that are just kind of lumped into this camp. In the book, Jamie is specifically trying to get back to his parents, and it's somehow discovered that his parents are in a different camp, so he spends a fair amount of time trying to convince people to let him go to the other camp. The movie doesn't really go into that. We just don't ever find out what happened to his parents, and I'm fine with that. It's all good. And then the story, the book and the movie jump forward from the beginning of this period of internment to now. It's 1945. It's right at the end of the war, and kind of all of the trials that the British and or American foreign prisoners, who are now not prisoners anymore, are kind of facing as they come out of that, and then eventually circles back to Jamie, who has been given the name Jim by Basie. Basie has said, "You need a shorter name. Your name is now Jim. New name for new life." Cool. So we call him Jim for the rest of the movie. And then eventually Jim has to face going home, but he doesn't really know what to do with that. And the movie doesn't really. I don't think the movie really portrayed that aspect of it very well. They were focused on other things, and that's totally cool. It was already a 2.5 hour long movie. I'm not judging what they did with the movie. Having watched it again, I really love the movie. Having watched it again, knowing what to expect, and having read the book now, I really love this movie. I think they did a really good job of capturing the essence of it. They did a really good job of portraying the British opulence versus the impoverished Chinese. They did a really good job of showing kind of the living conditions and how these people had to make a life for themselves in these very destitute situations. And they just captured it all so well, even though they did take a few liberties, and I'm totally cool with that. There are times and places where taking creative liberties and changing the story a little bit for the cinematic flow of the cinematic experience is, I accept it. I think this is one of those examples where everything worked together really well, and what they changed with it worked together really well with the story. What they do in the book that I appreciate is Jim has I don't know if it's really an identity crisis, but he spends a fair amount of time going, I don't know where what my home is going to be like. He's actually afraid. A few people confront him about you're afraid of the war ending because you don't know what it's going to be like outside. And we see it especially when they are taken out of the camp, and Jim leaves the camp and then goes back to the camp at least twice, possibly 3 times, but twice that I remember for sure. Keeps being with groups of prisoners who are being taken to this other location, and then he wanders back to the camp. And then he's with a bunch of other people that wander out to this other location, then he wanders back into the camp. He just goes right back to the camp because the camp is the only home that he's known for the past 3 years. And so he doesn't know like how to act in the world outside. Like, how does this even work anymore? And to be fair, when he does eventually get home, the world he knew is not even going to be there anymore. It's going to be a completely different thing. The homes have all been ransacked, and it's just been a whole thing. So it's like that's not surprising, but I really appreciated how the book portrayed him just continually returning to the place of familiarity, not necessarily because it's a good place, but because that's the only thing he knows. And so he keeps going back there and going back there and going back there, and to the point where you're literally just like you're just sitting there screaming like, why won't you just go find your family already? And it's like, because he doesn't know where they are, and he doesn't know anything. He's afraid of the world outside and moving beyond that comfort zone. So he keeps going back to what is familiar, what has become familiar, and what is comfortable, even though it is a horribly depressing situation, very unideal for growing up. So if you haven't had a chance to watch Empire of the Sun or read the book Empire of the Sun, I would suggest reading and watching. I think they complement each other. Reading the book definitely helped me understand what was happening and what to expect kind of going into the story. I think some of the dialogue can feel a little clunky to me, but that's just me. Jim Ballard, I had the thought reading the book, but they did a really good job of making Jim Ballard the sympathetic main character who is also just freaking annoying as all get out. And several characters just are very annoyed by him, and by the end of the whole thing you're annoyed by him, but he's still just like the character that you're rooting for. Like, you were annoying, you make really bad decisions, and I still want you to go home and I want you to find your family, which the book does not have the happy reunion scene. This is the spoiler. I'm just going to put this out there because I love it so much. The book does not have the happy reunion scene. The book cuts forward to after everybody's been reunited, and now Jim and his mom are gonna leave China, and his dad has some business there he has to finish up, but Jim and his mom are getting on a boat and they're leaving China for England. They're done with China. They're disenfranchised with it. They're like, we're gonna move. And Jim's a little scared because he's never been to England. He was born in China, he grew up in China, that's all he knows. In the movie, they don't do that as much, but they do have if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, or if you haven't seen the movie, stop watching right now. But, so that's your warning. You have been warned now. I will continue. In the movie, they have this really touching reunion scene where the parents are reuniting with the children, and this is coming on the heels of Jim talking with one of his other mentors in the camp, saying, I don't even know what my parents look like anymore. And he mentions, like, all I remember about my mom is watching her comb her hair, and she had dark hair. So then you come into this scene, and Jim finds a woman, and he takes her hat off and sees that she has dark hair. And it's just like, and they've got the song in the background, and I love the song, and I'm just crying. It was a beautiful moment. It's just, you gotta go watch the movie. I would recommend reading the book first, because there's a lot more detail that's in the book that isn't in the movie that I think is important to the story, especially if you have any interest in Pacific theater, World War II, or any sort of World War II in general. I am a World War II nut, so this is the kind of thing that draws my attention, especially now that I know that it's not a movie about a kid who wanders into a palace and gets adopted by an emperor. It is a completely different movie about a kid who gets separated from his family during a turbulent time in human history and survives a really deplorable situation against all of the odds with the help of an American, very suspicious American gangster guy and a bunch of really fun British people who are very nice to him, even though he is very, very annoying. And don't let me telling you that Jim is just a little annoying deter you from reading the story, because it is still, even though there are times when you just want to pull your hair out because he is so annoying, the story is just really, really, I would say it's a powerful story. It's a really meaningful story. Like the resilience of a person, especially a young person, to come through this story and then to come out on the other end and kind of survive that. And in the movie, I believe the concept is we're going to win the war. We're going to defy them by surviving, by living, and they do. So I would recommend this. I would say read the book, watch the movie. Let me know what you think in the comments.